science, accepted science, well-funded, well-appreciated around the world. When I decided to start a branch of my life of avocational science, the psychoenergetic science, that caused local earthquakes in the Stanford scientific community and in the scientific community in the U.S. Many people felt that I was betraying science to work in this field that conventional science thought was anathema, but that I thought was the pathway to a new science, to the future of science. And so I pursued it avocationally because I was not allowed to pursue it at Stanford. But to me, it was the fulfillment of the work I was to do, that all that had come before was only training to do this, we'll call it higher science, but the science in which humans and human consciousness became included in the experiment and would be eventually taken account of quantitatively and meaningfully in moving our science forward. And basically that's what I have tried to do. I had thought initially that if I did and I did these in parallel, if I did my conventional science in a way that people were very pleased and happy, and also did my avocational science, they would think it's the same person who does good work here. Let us look at his work in psychoenergetics. It was very naive of me to believe that. They would prefer to have swept it under the rug. They would have preferred that I was at some other university, hopefully outside the United States. But because I was a tenured professor, I didn't get fired. I did my job, my day job. But that was the reality of the situation. The university wasn't happy because I was lecturing and speaking in this area, and potential funders of the university couldn't understand this stuff, didn't want to understand this stuff. It just made it harder. But the prime directive is to keep on keeping on. And so I have kept on keeping on, and I have expanded this science from within. All the enlightenment that comes to me comes from within. And with that, I design experiments, and I have a little laboratory where we do experiments, and that is the truth. And I try to interpret those experiments honorably and thus build my understanding of this psychoenergetic science, which requires a frame of reference for viewing that aspect of nature and all of nature far beyond a single reference frame of space-time. And here is where I think we meet with the Kabbalah. And maybe I'll use a speculative model to illustrate it of how I view the whole person at this point in time. Think of a sphere. There are three zones: an outer zone, a central zone, and a core zone. The outer zone is made of two layers. The outermost layer is the atom-molecule layer of space-time. The layer immediately within is an inverse space-time layer. Together they form what I call physical reality, and the combination I call the personality self, that which we put on when we are born and that which we take off when we appear to die in the physical realm. The outer layer has well-developed sensory systems for interfacing with space-time. The inner layer has its own sensory system, which appears to be the acupuncture meridian chakra sensor system, which interfaces with the next zone. The next zone in my modeling is made of 3 layers. The outer layer is the emotion domain, the middle layer is the mind domain, and the middle layer, and the inner layer of that is the spirit domain, or a spirit domain, the indwelling spirit. And that is what I call the soul self. And the core is, as you might guess, is the high self, the God self. And so the issue of life is to build, to me, is to build infrastructure into these various layers by the actions of our life. And the more infrastructure there is, the more spirit, the high spirit, can enter, because it appears to need to attach to infrastructure. And a byproduct of the spirit attaching to dense matter, or to matter of some sort, the more consciousness there is. So consciousness to me is a byproduct of spirit in denser matter. And the evolution is really of the soul self. And the issue, the difficult issue, is to fully entrain the personality self with the soul self, and the soul self with the God self. And the block, the major blocking point in the entrainment, is the unwillingness of the personality self to surrender to the larger self and have faith that the larger self is working in a realm beyond complete understanding, but is doing it for the best reasons and is always looking for our best interests. That's my picture, and it illustrates the model as I see for physics to analyze nature. Take it away from the body, there is then 2 reciprocal, it's a duplex reference frame, 2 reciprocal force spaces, and they're embedded in 3 higher dimensional domains. And surrounding that is the huge domain of spirit. And to me, the relative universe is this 10-dimensional structure, which is mind as 10 dimensions, emotion is 9, and the others form 8. And the spirit, 11 dimensions and above, is what makes the absolute universe. And so the experiments that I do are dealing very much with the 2 outer layers of the personality self, or the physical aspects of nature. In general, these 2 layers are only very weakly coupled. And so instruments that can, at the moment, can only be in the atom molecule layer cannot sense what is going on in the vacuum layer. But in the modeling, there is an energy from the domain of emotion, which I call deltrons, and it's outside of space-time, so it's outside of relativity considerations. And it can go faster, I postulate, it can go faster and well as slower than light. So it can interact with the electric stuff of the cell molecule layer, and it can interact with the magnetic single charge stuff of the vacuum layer, which mathematics seems to suggest it's going faster than light. And so we, with our experiments, where we imprint intention into a simple little device, and that device, which has enriched by consciousness, it changes the local physical reality in whatever room it's in. After a while, you turn it on, and it takes some time for it to kindle the space, but the space eventually becomes conditioned to a higher level, where now the coupling between these 2 domains experimentally appears to become significantly increased. And therefore we begin to access with our normal instrumentation, or what was our normal instrumentation. It's instrumentation now that's been in this space, and so it is filled with the consciousness of that space, or whatever else is needed to have altered it so it now is able to access what before was inaccessible. And probably it's accessing things that go faster than light, so it potentially opens the door to that domain. So in terms of what have we accomplished over the last 35 years of experimental and theoretical investigations, it is to have at least a starting model which is quantitative at its core, and therefore potentially totally quantitative, which includes physics-type interactions between mind through emotion to this reciprocal space. All of those are frequency domains, so they're not spatially limited, they're not temporally limited, they're everywhere. And then the interface with the space-time domain. The way we see how these intentions act is that intention to me is an imprint on the domain of mind from the domain of spirit. And the response from the domain of mind is to form another pattern imprint on the reciprocal space, but also to activate these deltrons. And the deltrons act much like a toner in a Xerox machine. If you have enough toner, then the imprint can go through from the reciprocal space to the direct space, and that can activate all the physical, biological processes that we're all familiar with that cause the manifestation in space-time. If there isn't enough toner, then of course the imprint does not go through. So the systems are not coupled sufficiently. So we have a model then, and we have experiments which have shown that these intentions in these little boxes can have a very robust effect experimentally, very big signatures, not little ones that you have to generally wean out of the statistics, but in general quite large. And so if the conventional scientific community will seriously look at the experiments, they should change their mind about their unstated assumption. But they prefer not to look at the data. Unfortunate, but true. It just means that it will take more data over a longer period of time until they are willing to do that. The other things, we've learned other things. We've learned how to build a device which actually can measure the energy elevation of this conditioned space. And so we can continuously monitor what is going on, as well as we have a source to change this conditioning. The final thing, well, there are two things that we've learned. One is that this new energy that we're dealing with, not the deltrons, but the energy that is one of the main functioning energies in this coarse reciprocal space, because it's due to magnetic currents. We call it magnetoelectric, as in an analogy with electromagnetic at the atom molecule level. Because this energy functions in a frequency domain and is unlimited by space and time, it entangles one space-time location to another space-time location, one individual to another individual, one object to another object. They are coupled, and the coupling can be appreciable. So that's a very important piece of the physics, and it related very much to what's above the line you drew. And we have also experimentally shown, it needs to be done by others, but we have shown to sufficient satisfaction that the human acupuncture meridian chakra system is at a higher gauge symmetry level, something like what we produce with conditioning. And so that says that the energies that flow in that circuit, in this inner layer of the personality self, they can be modulated by mind, by intentions.